"No one wants to marry me," the alien girl cried, until a human said, "Come home with me." Seraphine stood by the edge of the great palace balcony, looking out at the vast landscape of her home planet. The bright purple sun was setting in the sky, casting a soft glow over the alien city below. Despite the beauty surrounding her, Seraphine felt a deep emptiness in her chest, a feeling she had known for far too long. Her heart ached with the weight of expectations. She was the princess of her people, destined to marry a noble suitor and continue the royal line. However, no one had come forward to claim her, and it wasn't because she wasn't beautiful or intelligent. She was both of those things. The problem was that she was too independent, too different from the other women of her species. She didn't fit into the mold they expected her to. The alien society on her planet was built on strict traditions. Marriage was not about love. It was a business arrangement, a way to strengthen political power or secure wealth. Seraphine had always known this, but deep inside, she longed for something different, a marriage built on mutual respect and love, not on duty. Her family had pressured her for years to find a suitor. "You must carry on the royal line," her father had said countless times. Her mother, always gentle but firm, had often reminded her, "It is your duty to marry well. It is not about you, it is about the future of our people." But no one had shown any real interest in her. The men who came to court her were always from powerful families looking for an advantage, not someone to love. They saw Seraphine as nothing more than a prize to be won, not a person to be respected. They didn't like her fiery spirit or her desire for independence. They didn't like that she questioned the rules. For them, she was too much of a challenge, too different. She had never felt more alone in her life. As Seraphine leaned over the balcony railing, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see her maid, Leora, walking toward her. The older woman had been with her for many years, and though they rarely spoke of personal matters, Seraphine could see the concern in her eyes. "My princess," Leora said softly, bowing her head respectfully, "the council has requested your presence." "They are discussing your future," Seraphine sighed, feeling a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. The council was always the same, pressuring her, reminding her of what was expected, telling her that time was running out. She had heard it all before. "I'm tired, Leora," Seraphine murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. It feels like I'm living a life that isn't mine." Leora nodded, understanding the deep frustration in her young mistress's words. "I know, my princess. But you are the future of your people. You must carry out your duty even if it is hard." Seraphine clenched her fists at her sides. Duty, that word had haunted her for years. She had spent her life trying to meet the expectations of others, but she had never asked herself what she wanted. Did she even know what she wanted? She had dreamed of love, but could love ever exist in a world where everything was about power and position? "Do you ever wonder what it would be like?" Seraphine began, speaking slowly, as if testing the words on her tongue, "to be free. To live without these chains of tradition, without the weight of duty." Leora paused, her eyes softening with sympathy. "I can only imagine, my princess, but you must remember freedom can come with a price. You cannot escape your responsibilities without consequence." Seraphine turned away, feeling the sting of those words. She had known them to be true, but they did little to ease the pain in her heart. She couldn't keep pretending that the life she had was enough. She wanted something more, something real. As she walked away from the balcony, her mind wandered to the one thing she had never allowed herself to hope for, true freedom. Could she leave this life behind? Could she break free from the expectations of her people? And what would happen if she did? Her thoughts were interrupted again, but this time by a sound she hadn't expected, a loud, unfamiliar noise outside the palace. A ship, large and metallic, had landed on the royal grounds. It was unlike anything Seraphine had ever seen. The design was sleek and futuristic, its exterior a strange blend of metals that gleamed in the setting sun. Leora followed Seraphine's gaze, her expression one of shock. "What is that?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. Seraphine didn't answer. Instead, she moved quickly toward the palace's entrance. She didn't know why, but she felt a pull toward the ship, as if it held something important, something she couldn't quite understand. Her feet carried her down the grand halls, past the marble pillars, toward the open courtyard where the ship had landed. Outside, a group of royal guards stood at attention, their faces hard and unreadable. At the foot of the ship stood a lone figure, a human, strange and out of place in this alien world. He wore a simple but well-made uniform, his eyes scanning the area with an expression of calm determination. Seraphine's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen a human before, but something about this man intrigued her. His presence seemed so different from everything she had known. She stepped closer, her heart racing with curiosity. The human looked up, and their eyes met for a brief moment. There was no fear in his gaze, only calm understanding. For a brief second, Seraphine felt like she had found something familiar in his eyes, a sense of hope, a glimpse of the life she had longed for. The human stepped forward and, with a respectful bow, addressed the royal guards. "I am Michael Carter, a representative of the Earth Federation. I come in peace." The guards stiffened at the mention of Earth. They had heard of Earth's existence, but the humans were seen as primitive, unworthy of notice. Still, Michael's calm demeanor seemed to soften their initial suspicion. Seraphine's heart beat faster as she watched him. She didn't know why, but something inside her stirred. Could this human be the key to what she had been longing for? Could he offer her the freedom she so desperately needed? Michael turned and, sensing her presence, walked toward Seraphine. He smiled kindly, and she felt a strange warmth in her chest. "You must be the princess," he said, his voice gentle but filled with strength. "I've heard much about you." Seraphine's mind raced, but all she could do was nod. "I am," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael studied her for a moment, then said, "I know this may sound strange, but would you come with me to Earth?" Seraphine blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Come with him to Earth. It was a bold offer, one that could change her entire life. But something inside her stirred, and she knew. This was the moment. This was the choice she had been waiting for. For the first time in years, Seraphine smiled. It wasn't a smile of politeness or duty, it was a smile of possibility, of hope. "Yes," she whispered, "I will come with you." And so, in that moment, Seraphine made the first step toward her freedom, leaving behind the life she had known and stepping into the unknown future that awaited her. The ship hummed softly as it ascended, leaving Seraphine's home planet behind. She sat in the quiet cabin, her hands resting on her lap, staring out of the small window as the stars blurred into streaks of light. Everything around her felt foreign, unfamiliar, and yet there was a strange comfort in the silence of space. It was as though she was finally free from the heavy chains of her royal duties. Seraphine's mind kept replaying the moment when she had said yes to Michael's offer. She hadn't even known why she had agreed at first. It was a sudden decision, one that could change her life forever. But when she had seen Michael and when their eyes had locked, something inside her had clicked. There was a feeling in his gaze, one that made her feel seen, understood, not as a princess or a duty to fulfill, but as a person. Michael had been kind to her since the moment they met. There had been no judgment in his eyes when she had asked him to take her away. He had only smiled, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Now, as the ship cut through the endless void of space, Seraphine couldn't help but wonder what Earth would be like. She had heard stories of the humans, of their wild, untamed planet, full of cities and life, but she had never imagined it would be her destination. "Are you comfortable?" Michael's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing in the doorway of the cabin, his face warm and friendly. Seraphine nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. The gentle hum of the ship was soothing, but her heart raced with the uncertainty of her decision. "I think so, it's just all so different." Michael smiled and stepped inside, taking a seat across from her. "I understand, it's a big change, but Earth isn't as strange as it seems. You'll find your place there, just like you did here." Seraphine hesitated, her fingers tapping nervously on her lap. "I don't know if I can. I've been taught my whole life that my place is here in my world. I've spent so long living for others, for my people. I've never thought about what I want. What if I don't fit in on Earth?" Michael's smile softened. "You'll fit in because you're you. And that's enough." The sincerity in his voice made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of hope. It was as though Michael believed in her more than she had ever believed in herself. For the next few days, the ship drifted through the stars, and Seraphine's nerves began to settle. Michael showed her around the ship, explaining the human technology that powered it. She learned about Earth's history and its people. She was fascinated by the stories of their struggles and triumphs. Humans, despite their flaws, seemed to have an unbreakable spirit. She found herself wondering, again and again, what her life could be like on this strange, beautiful planet. At times, she would catch herself gazing out at the stars, feeling the weight of everything she had left behind. She had walked away from her heritage, her royal duties, the very expectations that had shaped her entire life. And yet, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, there was an exhilaration inside her, a feeling she hadn't known existed. She was free. For the first time, Seraphine felt like she was her own person, not someone defined by the roles others expected her to play. After a few more days, they neared Earth. The planet came into view, blue and green, with swirling clouds of white. It looked so peaceful, so alive. Seraphine's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She was about to step into a new world, one that could offer her everything she had ever dreamed of. But just as she was about to ask Michael what would happen next, the calm atmosphere in the cabin shifted. The ship jolted suddenly, throwing Seraphine off balance. She gripped the seat, her heart racing in her chest. "What's happening?" she asked, panic rising in her voice. Michael's face had gone pale. He was already at the control panel, his hands moving quickly across the buttons. "Something's wrong," he muttered under his breath. Seraphine stood, her legs unsteady. "Is it a malfunction? What do we do?" Michael didn't answer right away, his face tight with concentration. "We've been intercepted. Someone's blocking our path." Seraphine's mind raced. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Had they followed her? Were her people coming to take her back? She hadn't expected to face this so soon. She thought she had escaped. Before she could ask another question, the ship was jolted again, this time with more force. The ship's lights flickered, and the hum of the engines shifted into a strange whine. Michael cursed under his breath and hit a few more buttons. "We have to get out of here," he said urgently. "I don't know who's doing this, but they won't stop. Hold on tight." Seraphine's stomach dropped as the ship lurched forward. She grabbed the nearest support bar and held on. Through the window, she could see a dark shape looming in the distance, another ship, much larger and more menacing than their own. "What is that?" Seraphine asked, her voice trembling. "Enemy ship," Michael answered. "They must have tracked us. It looks like they're coming for us." Seraphine's mind whirled. Her people, her family, had they finally caught up with her? She felt a pang of fear, but it was quickly replaced by something else, a feeling of resolve. She had made her choice. She had chosen freedom, and she wouldn't let it slip away so easily. "I'm not going back," Seraphine said, her voice firm. Michael glanced at her, his eyes wide. "You don't have to go back. We'll get out of this, but you need to trust me." Seraphine nodded, though her heart was pounding in her chest. She could hear the other ship now, its engines roaring as it closed in on them. With a deep breath, she made her decision. "What do we need to do?" Michael's hands flew over the control panel again. "I'm going to try to break free. Stay with me and don't let go." The ship was rocked once more, harder this time, and Seraphine braced herself, ready for whatever was coming. She had made her choice. She was no longer a princess bound by tradition. She was Seraphine, a woman with a future of her own making. And no matter what happened, she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. The ship shuddered again, and Seraphine felt the tension in the air, thick with fear and uncertainty. She clutched the armrest tightly, her knuckles turning white. Michael was working furiously at the control panel, his fingers moving quickly over the buttons, but his face was tense, filled with worry. The enemy ship was closing in, its massive silhouette growing larger and darker in the window. They were running out of time. "Michael," Seraphine said, her voice trembling slightly. "Are we going to be okay?" Michael glanced at her briefly, his eyes showing more determination than fear. "We'll be fine. Just stay with me. Trust me." Seraphine nodded, but deep inside, she wasn't so sure. The thought of being caught, dragged back to her planet, was overwhelming. What would happen if they found her? What would they do to her for defying her duties, for choosing freedom over tradition? Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. She couldn't afford to think like that now. The enemy ship was almost on top of them. It had to be 10 times larger than Michael's ship, its dark hull gleaming ominously in the distance. The radar beeped furiously, signaling the threat that was quickly approaching. Seraphine could see the large, menacing structure of the ship on the screen, its weapons systems clearly visible, ready to strike. "Michael, what's our plan?" Seraphine asked, her voice filled with urgency. Michael didn't answer right away. His focus was entirely on the ship's control systems. He gritted his teeth as he tried to make adjustments. "I'm going to try to outrun them. If we can get enough distance, we can jump to a different sector, a place they won't be able to track us." Seraphine could hear the fear in his voice, even though he was trying to mask it. They both knew that outrunning such a ship was a long shot, but it was their only chance. Michael's hands moved faster now, pressing a combination of buttons that made the ship's engines hum louder, the vessel accelerating. For a few moments, everything seemed to be happening in slow motion. The enemy ship fired a warning shot, its laser beams shooting across the space between them. The bright light reflected off the walls of their ship, casting a momentary glow in the cabin. Seraphine flinched, instinctively ducking her head. The ship lurched again as Michael pushed the engines harder. The force of the movement threw Seraphine back in her seat. She gripped the armrests again, trying to steady herself as the ship made sharp turns and quick evasive maneuvers. She could hear the hum of the engines in her ears, and the noise from the enemy ship firing again made her heart race even faster. Through the window, she saw the enemy ship closing in once more, and she could feel a chill run down her spine. It was relentless, and no matter how fast Michael tried to go, the enemy ship kept up, staying right behind them almost like a shadow. "We need to get out of here," Michael shouted, his voice cracking under the pressure. He pulled a lever and the ship veered sharply to the left, narrowly dodging another blast. Seraphine's mind raced. Was it too late? Were they going to be caught? She could almost hear the voices of her people in her head, her father's demanding voice, her mother's concerned words. But now, here in the cold vacuum of space, the only voice that mattered was her own. She had made a choice. This was her life now, and she couldn't let it slip away. "Michael, you have to keep going," she yelled over the noise of the ship. "We can't stop now." Michael glanced at her, his expression filled with exhaustion but also determination. "I know, Seraphine. I'm doing everything I can." They were in the final stretch now. Michael's ship was barely holding together under the pressure of the continuous evasion, but Seraphine saw something in Michael's eyes. He wasn't giving up, no matter what. Suddenly, there was a sharp crack in the ship's hull. The lights flickered and went out, leaving them in darkness for a moment. Seraphine gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael's voice was steady, but it didn't hide the worry. "We've taken some damage. I don't think I can keep this up for much longer." Seraphine's mind raced. She looked at the flashing lights, at the damage indicators on the control panel. They were running out of time. The enemy ship would catch them soon if they didn't do something drastic. "Is there any other way out?" Seraphine asked, her voice urgent. Michael was quiet for a moment, his fingers still moving rapidly over the control panel, trying to find a solution. Then finally he spoke. "There's a shortcut, but it's risky. I'll have to take us through an asteroid field. It'll be dangerous, but it's our best chance." Seraphine felt her heart skip a beat. An asteroid field? That was a gamble, but it was the only one they had. "Do it," she said without hesitation. "We have no other choice." Michael didn't waste another second. He yanked another lever, and the ship lurched forward again, this time in the direction of the asteroid field. Seraphine could feel the ship shaking, its engines roaring as it accelerated toward the danger zone. Through the windows, she could see the massive asteroids ahead, floating in the vast emptiness of space. The sight was both terrifying and beautiful. "Brace for impact," Michael shouted as they entered the field, dodging and weaving between the massive rocks. The ship jolted with every close call. Seraphine gripped the armrest, her body pressed hard into the seat, her heart racing as the ship zoomed through the narrow gaps between the asteroids. The enemy ship wasn't far behind. Seraphine could hear the thrum of its engines as it followed them, staying right on their tail, seemingly unwilling to give up. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move and they would be crushed. For what felt like an eternity, they dodged asteroid after asteroid. The ship rocked violently each time they came too close, but Michael's steady hands on the controls kept them on course. Seraphine could feel herself holding her breath with every sharp turn, her eyes locked on the screen ahead. And then, just as it seemed like they might make it, a loud explosion rang out and the ship lurched to the side. Seraphine screamed as the force of the blast threw her across the cabin. She hit the wall hard, pain shooting through her side. She gasped for breath, trying to push herself up. "Michael," she shouted, panic rising in her chest. "Are you okay?" There was no answer. For a moment, everything was silent. She pushed herself to her feet, her vision blurry, her body aching. She stumbled over to the control panel, where Michael was slumped forward, unconscious but alive. Seraphine's heart raced as she checked his pulse. He was breathing, but he was out cold. She didn't have time to panic. With shaking hands, she grabbed the controls, trying to steady the ship. She had no experience flying a ship, but she had to try. Her mind was clouded with fear, but she pushed it aside. She had come this far. She wasn't about to let everything slip away now. With all the strength she could muster, Seraphine managed to steer the ship through the asteroid field, using what little knowledge she had gathered in the past few days. The ship continued to shudder with each impact, but she kept her focus on the task at hand. The enemy ship was still behind them, but it had slowed down, unable to follow through the narrow gaps of the asteroid field. Slowly, Seraphine managed to get the ship on a stable course, steering them into an open space where they could breathe for a moment. When they were finally out of immediate danger, Seraphine allowed herself to collapse into the seat, gasping for air. She looked over at Michael, still unconscious but alive. She had done it. They had done it. For now, at least, the ship floated in the quiet darkness of space, far from the asteroid field and the dangerous enemy ship. Seraphine was exhausted, her body sore from the rough ride and the stress of what had just happened. She glanced over at Michael, still unconscious in the seat next to hers. She had managed to get the ship out of the asteroid field, but she didn't know how long they could stay in the open without being caught again. The enemy ship was still out there somewhere, and they couldn't keep running forever. Her hands shook as she adjusted the ship's controls, keeping them on course. They were far from Earth now, but the journey ahead seemed even more uncertain. She wasn't sure how much longer they could keep going without help. She had no experience navigating through space, and Michael's condition left her without anyone to rely on. She looked over at him again, her heart heavy with worry. He had taken a dangerous blow when the enemy ship had hit them with a blast. He was still breathing, his chest rising and falling, but his face was pale and his body slumped over, his hands still gripping the control panel like he had been trying to hold on for dear life. Seraphine swallowed, trying to push down the rising panic in her chest. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep flying the ship by herself. They had already lost time in the asteroid field, and she knew that they couldn't afford to stay in one place for long. The quiet beeping of the ship's systems broke her thoughts, and she quickly glanced at the monitor. They were running low on fuel, and the emergency supplies weren't going to last much longer. She felt the weight of their situation settle in. She couldn't keep flying without help, and they couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her mind. She couldn't afford to panic now. She had come this far, she had made a choice, and now she had to see it through. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as she sat in silence, waiting for Michael to wake up. Hours passed, and still, he remained unconscious. She couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. What if he didn't wake up? What if they were stuck here, drifting in space, unable to survive? Just as the silence seemed to stretch on forever, Michael's eyes flickered open. He groaned softly, raising his hand to his head as though trying to clear the fog from his mind. "Michael," Seraphine asked, her voice trembling with relief. "Are you okay?" Michael blinked several times, his vision slowly coming into focus. He looked around the cabin, then back at her, his face scrunching with confusion. "Where are we? What happened?" Seraphine quickly explained the situation, recounting their escape from the asteroid field and the damage to the ship. Michael's eyes widened as he listened, and when she finished, he let out a slow breath. "Good work," he said, his voice still weak. "I didn't think we'd make it." Seraphine smiled faintly, feeling a weight lift from her chest. She was relieved that he was awake, but the situation was far from over. "We're running low on fuel, Michael. We need to find a way to refuel, or we're not going to make it to Earth." Michael nodded, sitting up straighter in his seat. "I know, we've got to figure something out." He rubbed his eyes, still clearly shaken from the explosion. "We've got to find a place where we can land and get the supplies we need." Seraphine felt a spark of hope. "Do you think there's anywhere we can land? Somewhere safe?" Michael looked out the window at the stars. "There's a mining station nearby. It's not exactly a safe place, but it's our best option for refueling. We'll have to be careful, though. It's not exactly a welcoming place for strangers." Seraphine's heart skipped a beat. A mining station? It didn't sound like the ideal place for them, but it was their only choice. She nodded, her mind made up. "Let's go there." Michael took control of the ship, guiding them toward the station. The journey wasn't long, but every minute felt like an eternity. The enemy ship could be anywhere, and the thought of being caught again made Seraphine's stomach twist with fear. But she had no choice. She had to trust Michael and keep moving forward. As they approached the mining station, Seraphine couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The station was a cold, industrial structure, floating in the void of space like a giant metal beehive. It looked abandoned, with no sign of activity around it. But she knew that was just the way it looked. There had to be life on the station, even if it was hidden away. Michael piloted the ship toward the station's landing pad, and Seraphine felt her nerves tighten. She wasn't sure what to expect when they landed. Would the miners be hostile? Would they help them or turn them away? The ship touched down with a soft thud, and Michael immediately began powering down the systems. "Stay alert," he said, looking over at Seraphine. "We don't know what we're walking into." Seraphine nodded, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over her. She wasn't used to the feeling of uncertainty. Back home, she had always known what was expected of her, what her duties were. But now, everything was different. There were no rules here, no clear path, only the unknown. The ramp lowered with a hiss, and Michael stepped out first, his hand on the weapon at his side. Seraphine followed him, her own heart pounding in her chest. The air on the mining station was cold and stale, the metallic scent of machinery filling her nostrils. The station was dark, the lights dim, and the silence was overwhelming. They moved cautiously down the hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. The station felt empty, abandoned, but Seraphine knew better than to let her guard down. There had to be someone here, someone who could help them. They reached a small control room where a few flickering monitors were still active. Michael stepped inside, scanning the area. "This should be where they keep the supplies," he said quietly. Seraphine nodded, her eyes darting around the room. She was searching for anything that could help them. They couldn't afford to waste time. The longer they stayed here, the more likely it was that someone would find them. "Michael," Seraphine said softly, "do you hear that?" He stopped, his head snapping up. "What is it?" Seraphine strained her ears. There was a faint noise in the distance, the sound of footsteps approaching quickly. Her heart raced. "We're not alone," she whispered. Michael's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Get ready." The footsteps grew louder, and Seraphine's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew they had to be ready for anything. Suddenly, a door at the far end of the room slid open, and a group of miners stepped inside. They were rough-looking, their clothes torn and dirty, their faces hardened by years of working in the harsh conditions of the station. They didn't look like the welcoming type, and Seraphine's stomach twisted with unease. The leader of the group stepped forward, his eyes locking onto Michael and Seraphine. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What are you doing here?" Michael stepped forward, his posture tense but calm. "We need supplies, fuel, food, whatever you've got. We're stranded." The miner leader studied them for a moment, his eyes flicking over Michael and then to Seraphine. His expression softened slightly, but it wasn't a smile, more of a reluctant understanding. "We don't give out supplies for free," he said gruffly, "but we might be able to help." For a price, Seraphine's heart sank. Nothing in this station was going to be easy. The air in the mining station was thick with tension. Seraphine stood beside Michael, her heart racing as she stared at the miners who had just entered the control room. The leader of the group, a tall, muscular man with a rugged face, eyed them carefully. There was a coldness in his gaze, but also a flicker of something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe just the usual wariness that came with surviving in a place like this. Michael took a step forward, his voice steady. "We don't have time to waste. We need fuel and food. We're running low, and we can't afford to be stuck here any longer." The leader of the miners crossed his arms, his face unreadable. "Why should we help you?" he asked. "You're strangers here, and strangers don't get things for free." Seraphine could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air. They were outsiders in this harsh, isolated place, and they had nothing to offer in return. She could sense the miner's suspicion, and she didn't blame him. If she were in his position, she might feel the same. Michael's face remained calm, though Seraphine could see the frustration in his eyes. "We're not looking for charity. We'll pay for what we need. But we don't have much time, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to get what we need." The miner leader seemed to consider this for a moment. He looked over at the other miners who were standing in the shadows, watching with cautious eyes. Finally, he spoke again. "All right," he said. "We can help you, but we don't trade for credits here. We trade in labor." Seraphine felt a knot form in her stomach. Labor? What did they expect them to do in return? She glanced at Michael, who nodded slowly as though he had anticipated this. "What kind of labor?" Michael asked, his voice low. The leader of the miners stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. There's a mine not far from here. We've been having trouble with one of the mining machines. It's broken down and we can't fix it. If you help us repair it, we'll give you what you need. Fuel, food, whatever we can spare. Seraphine's mind raced. It wasn't the deal she had hoped for, but it was their only option. They had no choice but to agree. She looked at Michael, who seemed to be weighing the situation carefully. Fine, Michael said after a long pause. We'll help, but we need supplies now, food and water. We can't afford to wait. The miner leader gave a curt nod. You'll get your supplies, but the repair needs to be done first. We'll lead you to the mine. Without another word, the miners turned and began walking toward the exit of the control room. Seraphine and Michael followed, their footsteps echoing through the silent station. The air felt colder now, and Seraphine couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The miners didn't speak as they led the way, but Seraphine could sense the tension in the air. Everyone was on edge. As they walked down a narrow corridor, Michael turned to Seraphine and whispered, "Stay close. I don't trust them completely." Seraphine nodded, her heart still pounding in her chest. She hadn't expected things to go smoothly, but she hadn't imagined it would be like this. The station felt eerie, deserted, as though they were walking through an abandoned world. They arrived at the mining vehicle, a large, heavy machine that looked old and worn down. The miners were already gathered around it, looking at the broken components with frustration. The machine had clearly been damaged for a while. The metal was dented, and wires hung loosely from its sides. The leader of the miners pointed to the machine. "This is it. It's a big job, but if you want the fuel and supplies, you need to fix it." Michael walked over to the machine, inspecting it closely. Seraphine stood back, watching as Michael's hands moved over the broken parts. She could tell that he had some experience with machinery, but even he seemed unsure about how to fix something this complex. "It's going to take time," Michael muttered under his breath, "but we'll manage." The miners stood in a loose circle around them, watching their every move. Seraphine could feel their eyes on her, their suspicion never fully gone. She couldn't help but wonder if they were being watched for more than just their ability to fix the machine. Michael turned to her, his voice low. "We need to get this done fast. The longer we stay here, the more likely it is that someone will find us." Seraphine nodded, determination settling in her chest. They had made it this far, and they couldn't afford to fail now. She stepped forward, ready to help. For the next few hours, they worked together, trying to repair the machine. Michael took the lead, showing Seraphine how to handle the tools and what parts needed replacing. It was hard work, and the tension in the air never fully lifted. The miners didn't help. They just watched, their arms crossed, waiting for the job to be done. Seraphine couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The silence between the miners was strange, and she couldn't figure out why they seemed so distant. She could sense their mistrust, but she couldn't understand why they weren't offering more assistance, especially since the job seemed so difficult. As the day dragged on, the machine was slowly coming together. They had replaced a few key parts, and the engine seemed to be getting closer to functioning. But it wasn't enough. They still needed to do more work, and time was running out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Michael stepped back and wiped the sweat from his brow. "I think we're almost there. Just one more adjustment, and we should be good to go." Seraphine took a step back, feeling the weight of the day settle in her bones. She was exhausted, but they couldn't stop now. They needed the fuel, and they needed to leave. Just then, one of the miners stepped forward, his voice gruff. "You've done your part," he said, "but we're not giving you the fuel until we see if the machine works." Michael looked at him sharply. "We've done everything you asked. You promised us supplies in exchange for the repair." The miner shrugged, his expression unreadable. "We've given you enough, you get what we give you." Seraphine's blood ran cold. She could see the trap now. They hadn't been told the full truth. The miners weren't planning to give them the fuel. They had only helped them so far to see if the machine would work, and now that it was close, they had no intention of honoring their end of the deal. Michael's jaw clenched. "You're going to keep your word, or we'll leave without your help." The miner chuckled darkly. "And where would you go? You're stranded here. You need us more than we need you." Seraphine stepped forward, her voice steady. "You promised us supplies, and we've kept our part of the bargain. Don't make us regret helping you." The tension in the air thickened. The miner leader watched them closely, his eyes flicking to the other miners. It was clear that this wasn't just about the fuel anymore. They had underestimated Seraphine and Michael, thinking they could take advantage of them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the miner leader nodded. "Fine," he said, his voice begrudging. "You'll get your supplies. But remember this, there's always a price for everything." Michael didn't say anything. He simply turned away, motioning for Seraphine to follow him. As they walked toward the station's storage room, Seraphine couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. They had managed to get what they needed, but the encounter left a bitter taste in her mouth. They were leaving the mining station with supplies in hand, but the journey ahead was still uncertain. As the ship lifted off the pad and soared into the vastness of space, Seraphine glanced back at the station, knowing that they had barely escaped a dangerous situation. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but for now, they had what they needed to survive.